Welcome to the Three Things Podcast. I'm David Iglesias, Director of Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics. You may be wondering why this podcast is called Three Things. You were probably taught by your parents, like I was, that it was impolite to talk to people about three things: religion, politics, and money. But what happens if your job is to talk about those three things? Well, let's find out. Today's guest is Bill Pollard, former CEO of ServiceMaster Company, member of numerous boards, including former Wheaton College Board of Trustees Chairman, the Drucker Institute, and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Bill also practiced law, specializing in corporate finance and tax matters, and served as a vice president of Wheaton College. He's a published author and is probably best known for his best-selling book, The Soul of the Firm. Bill and I have taught undergraduates together at Wheaton. He received his BA from Wheaton, Juris Doctor from the Northwestern School of Law, and an honorary doctorate from Wheaton. He's been married to Judy over 61 years. They have 4 adult children, 15 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. Bill's podcast will be released over 2 episodes, so please join me for part 2, which will be released in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to Three Things Podcast, Bill.
David, I'm glad to be with you.
Well, let's start with a little bit of a background. Can you tell me how you came to choose Wheaton College to attend?
Well, it was really my folks encouraged that. I grew up in Chicago, and when I was in 7th grade, we moved to Wheaton, and they wanted me to be aware of the significance of Wheaton College, and I did not understand that at that point, but I got to know a little bit more about Wheaton College as I went to the Wheaton Academy for high school. And of course, at that time, the Wheaton Academy was under the arm of the college. And so I did my high school years in the Wheaton Academy. And it was just kind of normal that I should go to the college here. And especially when my young lady that I thought I loved, and I turned out in life I did love, Judy, was also graduating from the academy, and she was also coming to the college.
Well, that's great.
So the both of us decided we'd go to the college.
What major were you?
I was a business major, yeah.
Would you choose the same major today, knowing what you do?
Yes, I think I would. Yep.
So you ended up going to law school. You practiced law for a number of years, but most of your professional career was in the corporate world. Can you tell us why you left the practice of law?
Well, I started out with a large firm in the Chicago area, down in the Loop, and worked there for about 4.5 years, and I rode the train every morning and evening with a fellow that also went to Wheaton College.
Huh.
And we got talking one day and said, we both live in Wheaton. Why don't we open up our own firm?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of an understanding that would be an objective. And so after about 4.5 years in the big firm in Chicago, Otis and I opened up our own firm out here in the Wheaton area and started our own practice. And that went on for about 4 years, 4.5 years also. And then we were approached by another firm in the Wheaton area who asked if we would consider merging with them. They were a larger firm,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was a great idea. Otis didn't think it was a great idea, and he said he was ready to go back to the law firm that he was with in Chicago. So Otis went there, and I took our firm, and we merged it with this other firm, and I practiced there for, again, about another 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during this period of time, I was also representing Wheaton College as their attorney.
Ah, okay.
And so that got me very much engaged in a lot of things that were going on in the college and issues that had to be resolved and needed a lawyer. So I worked closely with Dr. Armerding at that point, who was the president. And one day I can remember him saying, "Bill, would you consider leaving the practice and coming here and helping us on the business side of the college?" And the fellow who has been running that is retiring, and we'd love to have you, and I'd love to have you work closely with me. You would report directly to me, and all the operations of the college,
Mm-hmm.
as far as the physical operations and all of the businesses relating the college, finance office, and so forth, would be reporting to you. So after about maybe 6 months talking to my partners, they said I probably ought to, if I wanted to do it, they would give me a leave of absence from the law firm, and I came to Wheaton College.
Was that a hard decision to leave the practice of law and working for the college?
You see, David, I wasn't really, in my mind, leaving the practice of law because I had this open position to come back to this firm, and so I was
leaving the firm.
I was trying it out,
Mm-hmm.
and of course we were by that time a significant client. The college was a significant client of the firm, so the firm was happy that they had me there now and full time. No, and that in God's own plan,
Mm-hmm.
that role at the college introduced me to two people that were very important in my life. It was Ken Hansen and Ken Wessner. They were both.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Hansen at that time was chairman of the board of ServiceMaster, as well as on the board at Wheaton. And Ken Wessner was then president of ServiceMaster and on the board at Wheaton. And so I interacted with them with respect to Wheaton business, but they got to know me too.
Mm-hmm.
And the day came where Ken Hansen sat down with me and said, "You know, you're not going to be here forever at Wheaton. I know you're probably going to go back to your law firm. Would you consider a position at Wheaton at ServiceMaster?" And so that was the opening to go to ServiceMaster, and that the rest of the story is I was there for over 25 years.
Oh my! What was your first position at ServiceMaster?
My first position was senior vice president, and served. The franchise business reported to me. All of the internal functions of the firm reported to me. We were a public company, so I was responsible for the presentation of the company to the Wall Street. So that was my beginning. Then I had direct operating responsibilities for the business. By that time, as we grew, we were not only serving a lot of people with our franchise business, but we were directly serving healthcare institutions. And we became the largest provider of care, cleaning care for hospitals across the country, and actually expanded it to a worldwide business.
Is it true that part of your initial training was to mop floors at one of those hospitals?
Well, that was my introduction to ServiceMaster. Yeah, I spent over a week doing all the things that our laborers did, and washing floors and so forth was all part of it. It was a standard requirement at ServiceMaster that you identify with all levels in the organization in seeking to understand it and understand the people and the challenges that they had in doing their job and the importance of it. So
when
yes.
ServiceMaster said hands-on training, they were literally asking you to be hands-on and mop and mop the floors, right?
Yeah, and have those impressions as you're mopping a floor in a hallway and people are walking by and they don't say hello to you. They don't. If you're in a hospital, they don't say hello to you. They just expect you to get the job done, and
yes,
you're just hanging on to a mop.
Now, given your professional background in law and higher ed, was it difficult for you to do that?
It was a learning experience. It was expected of me, and I knew that when I was hired.
Okay.
So, and I agreed with the principle.
Yes.
That there shouldn't be an officer in the company that didn't experience the basic work we were doing for our customers.
So I had a similar experience my first few months in the Navy. I was a young officer, and I found myself one morning in sweats polishing brass. And I thought to myself, what am I doing after going to law school, college, passing the bar exam, polishing brass? And then I realized everyone, regardless of their background, had to do that. And I thought, well, I think I'm learning an important lesson. I might not like it now, but I think in the future I will look back and be glad, and that's precisely what happened. So you served as CEO twice as ServiceMaster, which was at the time a Fortune 500 company. And I believe that the top corporate value of ServiceMaster was honoring God in all we do. Since this was a for-profit company, how did you manage to instill this very Judeo-Christian value into the company?
Well, it was part of our objectives. It was our first objective. And the objectives were to honor God in all we do, to help people develop, to pursue excellence, and to grow profitably. And when you came to ServiceMaster, for example, when you're in your early days of coming, and we had class sessions for the people that were hired by the company, and we would explain those objectives and what they meant. And there was a continued process of reviewing all those, and we reviewed the four together. And we started out obviously with the first one, to honor God in all we do. And what did that mean? Did that mean that you have to believe in God? No, you don't have to believe in God. But there's a consequence if you don't believe in God. And then, opened up to those of us that were Christians to share our faith as to what that meant in God's way. But that there was a God, and if you didn't believe it, you ought to be thinking about it, because there's a lot of people that do believe it. And we're not especially good business because we honor God. We honor God as people, and we work as a business to be a good witness
Mm-hmm.
of the person we honor. And that's God. And then that often would get us in the story of not just God, but Jesus Christ and
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
forth, what the Bible says, especially for people who didn't have any background in the Bible. So it was a general discussion. We did not use it as a basis of hiring. You didn't have to be a Christian to be hired. You didn't have to be a Christian to be promoted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had to be doing your job and performing well and operating within ServiceMaster consistent with those principles.
So, Bill, did you meet resistance to this value of honoring God in all we do?
Oh, sure. As I indicated, one of my responsibilities was to relate to Wall Street, and I often got questions about those objectives because we always started out our presentation with our 4 objectives.
Yes.
And we made it clear that we were raising the question of God. We were not imposing it, because if you wanted to understand God, you had to understand what an individual believed or didn't believe. And it was not what a business believed or didn't believe. It was what an individual believed or maybe didn't believe or didn't know. And so that's how we discussed it in Wall Street. Sometimes we got a question from a customer, especially as we're serving large hospitals. What are you introducing here? Some of the hospitals that were connected with churches wanted to make sure we weren't bringing some different dimension of the faith
Yes.
into their hospital. So, but we got down to the service we were delivering, why we were delivering it, and our importance in delivering it with people. We couldn't deliver it any way except with people. Every time we were involved in a cleaning function, it required a person. And so we spent time in our training programs of asking the question who people really are. They're more than their job. And so that's how we responded. We didn't really run into anything of significance in the United States, but when we went internationally, and I initiated the international business when I was in ServiceMaster. We had a slight business in England, but apart from that, we didn't have much of an international business. So we spread to the east as well as the west in our international business. And we got questions, more questions about it. Some even in some places wanted us not to refer to it at all in our dealing with their employees. And we would agree that we wouldn't refer to it. So we raised the question of God, didn't impose it.
Yes. I also saw that growing profitably was a core value. Why do employees need to be reminded that profit is important?
Well, profit is important in life.
Yes.
Not just in a business. Are you productive in what you're doing? And are you productive in raising your children? Are you productive? And profit is in business. Profit is a measure of whether you have a value in the service you're delivering, and somebody is willing to pay for that, which will result in a profit, a receipt of money more than cost. But when you start back and say, where is profit in life? It's more than just in money, more than cost. we need to be profitable in our lives. We need to be profitable in our relationship with others. It needs to grow. Nothing ever stays still. It either grows or detracts, and that's including your relationship with your spouse.
Yes. Can you tell me about the biblical basis for this important value?
Well, it's all over the Bible. I mean, that's where, when we got pressed, we referred to the Bible and say that's where we get our source about who God is and how He has dealt with the race, the people He's created. And He's the source in our creation, and He was the source in bringing His Son, and then it would open the whole story of the life of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why do you think some Christians have a problem with making a profit? I mean, I've heard comments to the effect that for-profit is not as, Christian, for lack of a better phrase, or criticizing capitalism, which, is predicated on making a profit. Why do you think some Christians struggle with that?
Well, you can get carried away,
mm-hmm.
and people like to be rich, and Christians like to be rich. So, it can become a fetish in life.
Yes.
Both to be profitable and to be rich, but the richness question, the accumulation of money, is another whole story. See, that's different than just profit. It's taking the profit and accumulating it. So that's stewardship. That gets into a whole separate question of, certainly as Christians, our responsibility to handle wealth if we're going to incur it and have it, because it's not ours, it's God's.
Amen.
And how are we sharing that with organizations like Wheaton College or other organizations that are serving God directly? And yeah.
Oh, that's very helpful. Can you tell me how ServiceMaster changed under your leadership?
How it changed?
Yes.
Oh, it changed by we were at a point, a little over $1 billion when I took over, and when I went to step back the first time, we were close to $6 billion.
Oh my!
And it was how do we take these principles and expand them to other service deliveries? For example, we bought Terminix, killing bugs for people.
Yes.
American Home Shield was another company we bought. But we bought a series of companies to fill some of the gaps so that we didn't have to start at zero. So we made acquisitions during my tenure.
It sounds like those would be some of your major accomplishments. Can you tell me some of your other top accomplishments as CEO?
Well, I would like to think that it would relate to the growth of people coming out of and the recognition and the sadness as I look back on it is what occurred as I came back the second time as CEO. My successor was Carlos Cantu, who had been president of Terminix.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a fine man, He was Catholic, but he was a man of faith, and did a great job. And then after about 5 years, was diagnosed as having cancer.
Oh my.
And he had to step back quickly for a major operation. He was out for about 7 months, and that's when the board said, Bill, you've got to come back in. I was chairman of the board at the time and chairman of the company. And so I came back in and then served for about 1.5 years before we recruited John Ward from the outside. And that ultimately turned out to be a poor decision. Carlos, by that time, had to retire. I was ready to retire and retired. And John Ward, over a period of 2 to 3 years, totally failed. Now, he was a professing Christian, but he totally failed in implementing the growth of the business, handling the other issues in the business, and ultimately had to be terminated by the board. This was after I had retired from the board. And since that, and then ServiceMaster as a company was bought. So today has all different dimensions to it. It's much smaller. Our franchise business is still doing basically what we did back then, but all the other businesses either have been sold or spun out or done other things with. So ServiceMaster is not the business today it was. And of course, when we had those objectives, we used to refer to the fact that we were seeking to be masters of service, serving the master.
Ah, that's where the name comes from. Okay.
Yep.
So looking back on your business career, what would you say were the biggest setbacks?
That was the biggest setback in the sense, as I look back at it.
Yes.
Of course, I wasn't there to make the decision to terminate him, but I was participating in the decision to hire him. And we should have promoted somebody from within. We would have been far better off, I think. But anyway, that was all in God's plan.
Well, thank you for that. This ends part 1 of my interview with former ServiceMaster CEO Bill Pollard. We'll pick up again for part 2 of my interview in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to a podcast from the Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics. You can find us at wheaton.edu/